Okay, so good morning, everybody. I am so happy that you guys are all here. Hopefully you are all the grown-ups of some of our Bay Laurel fifth graders. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay, but hopefully this will be something that will be really helpful for you as you're getting ready to transition from being an elementary school parent to being a middle school parent. So today we're going to be talking about a couple different things. So some of those things are going to include, this is just our agenda for today. We are going to be breaking down the components of a student's life, defining resilience, because this is something that we really want to build up in our students as they're getting ready to go towards middle school. We are going to talk a little bit about the growth versus fixed mindset and things that we can say and do to support our students as they're becoming middle schoolers. I am going to go a little bit into a development model just because it's one of my most favorite things in the world, but I promise I won't get too deep in the weeds on that one. And then ending up with how we can support our students in middle school, because that's why we're all here, right? Is to support our kiddos when they get to middle school. So when we're talking about in this ideal world, there's so many different components of a student's life, which we'll talk about in just a second, but just go with me on this. So we're all going to close our eyes and imagine that we are going to middle school and we are having the best day in the whole entire world. You wake up in the morning and you feel rested, like you had a beautiful night's sleep, you had just great dreams. You look in the mirror and you don't even have to brush your hair, and it's the most perfect hair day. Your favorite pair of jeans just fit just right, and you come down the stairs and your mom says, "Oh, honey, I just love you so much. Your hair is amazing. Here, I made your favorite breakfast because I know that this is what's going to make you have an excellent day." Oh, seeing you every morning just makes me so happy. And then you put on your backpack and you walk to school, and on your way you pass your neighbor and your neighbor says, "You know what? I just saw that you planted those flowers in your front yard over the weekend with your parents. Your yard is the most beautiful yard that I have ever seen. You guys did such an amazing job." And then when you get to school, you walk into class and your teacher walks up to you and puts a test in front of you and says, "You know what? Your test, when I was reading your answers, were the most insightful, thorough, beautiful answers I have ever seen. And I am so proud of you and your hard work. And I'm so lucky to be your teacher," right? At lunch, your best friends sit next to you at a table and just look across the table at you and say, "Wow, I'm so lucky to have a friend that is such a good listener like you, who is able to really take it in and support me and be wonderful. I am just so lucky to be your friend." At soccer, after school, you score the game-winning goal and your team tells you that you are the reason that they are just so successful. Your hard work is what just makes such a difference. And when you get home, you don't even have that much homework, which is awesome. And before you eat dinner, which is your favorite meal, you sit down with your family and everybody talks to each other and loves on each other. And your dad looks across the table and says, "Your smile is the reason that my day is so bright and wonderful." And that night you go to bed with this huge smile on your face and you just think to yourself, "I'm special. I am enough. I am surrounded by people who love me. And wow, I just love myself." Now that sounds like an amazing day, right? I personally would love to have a day like that that's just full of all these most amazing things. And if we look at the different components of a student's life, right, there are so many different pieces. There are that family component, there's that education or school component, there's that recreation, so that extracurricular component, and then there's that social component, which becomes a really big key piece, especially when we get to middle school and high school, when peers start to become the people that our students go to first, sometimes even before the adults. Now, in this ideal world, this student has really great support in all of these areas. So the student can feel successful and feel like they're thriving, right? But if one of these pieces, if something is a little different in one of these pieces, then maybe those are going to be areas where a student might need a little bit more resilience, might need a little bit more support. Now, imagine in that story, instead of having all these amazing things happening, you didn't get a really good night's sleep the night before because your parents were fighting and you could hear it through the wall and you just felt like maybe it was your fault. Or maybe your guardian had to work late the night before, so you were the one that was responsible for making dinner for your younger siblings. Or maybe you got a bad grade on something and you just feel like, man, I'm never going to get this. I'm just never going to understand. Or no one checked in with you and asked how your day was, whether that be at school or at home or at your extracurriculars after school. There's sometimes that students might get through a whole day and no one has said their name. Or maybe you got in a fight with a friend at lunch and you had to sit by yourself. Or if we look at some of these larger issues that sometimes our students have to face, maybe they are experiencing the separation or divorce of their parents, or maybe there's a death in the family or an illness in the family. And these are all really big things that can impact different pieces of a student's life, because maybe if there is an issue at home, then it might impact the time that they can devote to an extracurricular, or the time that or energy that they can put into their homework. So there's a lot of different pieces that go into making up an individual, and these are all things that affect us too as adults. But if we think about it in the context of our 6th, 7th, 8th graders, our little kiddos that are going off into middle school, that's a lot to carry, especially if you feel like you don't have some of those additional supports. And so this is where we can really come in to help support our kiddos in what we are looking at in building their resilience, because everybody is going to face a hard time. Everybody is going to face a challenge or a difficulty. We face them sometimes even on a daily basis as kids and as adults. And so what can we do in the face of some of those challenges to really make sure that we are supporting ourselves if we were those students, or supporting our students as they're getting ready to go on to middle school? So resilience is going to be a really key factor. And, if we're looking at like persistence and grit and resilience, I am going to get a little cheesy. I'm not a big person on giving, the Webster definition dictionary, but if we're looking at resilience, we're talking about what that means is becoming strong, healthy, or successful again after something bad happens. And that doesn't mean that it has to be a big, huge catastrophe. It could just be a really small moment. Like maybe you heard a friend say something, or you interpreted something a certain way, and it kind of impacted the way you felt, right? Even something small, when things start to build up on top of each other, can feel really big. And so resilience also means bouncing back after being pulled or stretched or bent. So if you look at my little picture of my spring, sometimes like a slinky, even if you pull it apart, it's going to come back together. And now if something is pulled or stretched or bent in a really traumatic or large way, then it might come back together and look a little different, but it's still going to be able to bounce back a little bit. And the one thing that we can do is we can help support them through that. Now, being resilient, and this is something that's really important for us as adults to understand, is being resilient does not mean that you are invulnerable. It does not mean you're perfect. It does not mean you're weak. It does not mean you're limited, right? And so we know as adults, we make mistakes every single day. And sometimes they're small and sometimes they're much larger, right? And so sometimes our students, though, especially when they start getting into middle school and high school, they start to feel like any sign of weakness or any small mistake is going to make or break the rest of their life. And that's something that we need to be able to really stop from the beginning as the adults in their life, and let them know that being resilient and working through areas of concern or challenges doesn't mean that they have to be perfect all the time, right? And so there's a bunch of opportunities for building resilience in middle school. Those social relationships, they're going from being in a class of 20 to 30 students with one teacher that knows them really well for a full year, into a school where there's going to be hundreds of students in their same grade, where they are traveling from one class to another for 6 classes the whole day. So they're going to be in rooms with a bunch of different people. There's students from all over that are going to be converging into this one middle school space. They're going to be meeting a bunch of new people. They're going to have 6 adults that they're going to be teaching them throughout the day. So those papers, projects, schoolwork, right? They might not always get along or prefer a certain teacher or instructor, just like we as adults might not always prefer or get along with people who are above us or coworkers. But this is an area for them to be able to build some of that resilience. Sports, instrument, theater, extracurriculars. LeBron didn't come out of the womb shooting 3-pointers. He had to work for it, right? Family situations are opportunities to build resilience, balancing life. This is something that I know even as adults, we might struggle with a little bit. I personally have 4 calendars in my home, and that still is something that I need to work on in terms of that work-life balance. So when we're looking at a student, especially in middle school, where they start to have more opportunity for clubs, for activities, for extracurriculars that are going to take up more time of their day, we need to be able to work with them to build that balance into their day, because we have to understand that there's time for homework. They need to have time for homework. They need to have time for extracurriculars and fun, but they also really need, and students really, really need that downtime with nothing scheduled and that family time for them to be able to build themselves back up, for their brains to be able to calm down and reset so that that way they can go into the next day and be at their very, very best. So there's a bunch of opportunities, like I said, for building resilience. The fixed versus growth mindset. This is a big area where we as adults can really support our students. So just to give a brief outline of each one. So fixed mindset is really the idea that you feel like you're kind of just dealt a certain hand, like you're dealt a certain amount of intelligence and that you just kind of max out there, or you're dealt a certain amount of skills and, oh, my skills only go up to here, so I can never get better and I can only go up to this point, right? And so a lot of times students who have a fixed mindset might focus on that outcome data. So they're going to focus really on how many points they scored in a game and only on that, or if they won or lost, or the grade that they earn on a paper or in a class. And that's going to be what they think says the most about them. So they feel like there might be that limited success in the world. And if somebody else gets it, that means that they can't also be successful as well. Oftentimes we're going to see things like, I'm never going to get better. I just can't do it. So I'm just going to stop, right? Like there's no point in me trying because I'm just never going to get it. That's going to be something that I've seen a lot with students, and in my experience, because I come from the high school, so I worked at the high school for a long time, and I've seen that a lot, where students are just like, well, I'm just never going to get it, so it's not worth trying, so why should I even put the time and energy into it, right? The growth mindset is kind of the opposite, and that's really where we as adults want to help encourage our students. So that is the idea that we can grow, that our brains are constantly growing, that we can constantly be learning and improving and getting better and challenging ourselves. So these types of students are going to be the ones that might focus on a mistake as a learning opportunity. So where the fixed mindset student might get 9 out of 10 on a quiz and see that they missed one and be like, oh, you get it, right? Then maybe that growth mindset student, that student that is looking at those areas of growth, they might be seeing that that particular opportunity is going to be a space for them to learn. So they might look at that thing that they got incorrect and say, you know what? This is going to be really awesome for me because I can go to my teacher and I can ask about that one that I got wrong and see what I can do better for next time. And this is something your students have all learned from me this year, is that their brains are growing all the way until they're in their mid-20s. So they're still growing, they're still learning, their brain is expanding, they're getting so much more information and data into their brains every single day. And I think what's really important is to emphasize that they're not going to get something done perfectly on the very first time that they try. They are going to have to learn and put in the time and effort. And we as adults can really lay that foundation of encouraging and praising the effort that our kids put into something. And so things like, you work so hard. I'm so proud of you for all that time that you put into that paper. You seem, it seemed really tough, but you stuck with it. Great job. Mistakes help us learn. What's another strategy that you might try? If you notice that they're coming up against a challenge and maybe they're starting to feel a little frustrated, you say, I see that you tried this strategy. What's something else you might try? And the word yet is the most amazing word. I've used it with a lot of your fifth graders this year. Is if a student says, I just don't get it, I just can't understand it, I can't do it, adding that word yet onto the end refixes their brain almost and lets them know that they can still work towards it. So if a student comes in, and this is an example that I've worked with a student this year, student says, I just can't do this math problem. I can't understand how to do this. And then we rephrase it and say, well, I can't understand how to do this yet. And that teaches them that they still have the opportunity to keep trying, keep learning, and grow from that experience. So that word yet, key. So that's one thing to remember, right? Is that word yet. I love the word yet. I use it a lot. And I think one of the things to just also keep in mind really, and that we can really encourage with our students when it comes to that growth mindset opportunity, is that understanding that we as adults also don't get things right always on the first try, that we make mistakes sometimes, and really letting them know that, you know what, hey, I messed up, but this is what I might do better next time, and modeling that for them, and not putting that much pressure on them to feel like they do have to be perfect, right? Because resilience is not being perfect. And one grade in a middle school class is not going to determine where they go in their future. And I think that that's something that I saw a lot, especially at the high school, is that the students, by the time they get to high school, they feel almost conditioned that every single point that they can earn is the make or break between them going to college and being successful. But there are thousands and thousands of colleges in the United States, and they all want freshmen. And so there's options out there for everyone. And I think having those conversations, that the growth and the effort and putting in the practice is just as important as the grade, because those are the skills that we want them to start building on and learning. So like I said at the beginning, I am going to give you a little spiel on one of my favorite development models. I'm not going to go deep dive into this with you. I just kind of want to stay up here at that 30,000 foot view with you. So really the positive youth development model, because we're just talking about resilience, the reason why I love this one is that this model really holds that every child is born resilient. Every single child is resilient. Not that they have the ability to be, that they are resilient. And then it's our job as adults to really nurture that in them. It holds that youth and children are not broken. They don't need to be fixed. They're not in need of any type of psychological repair. They're not problems to be managed. They are resilient and they are strong, and it's our job as adults to support them through that and nurture them through that. And this is very specifically, this model starts actually at the beginning of adolescence. This is where our fifth grade kids are right now as they're transitioning into middle school. So like I said, 30,000 foot view. There's 7 C's of the PYD model, so the positive youth development model. So competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, control, coping. Not going to go into deep dive in those, but I do want to talk about just a couple of them. So confidence, especially as our students are going into middle school, is going to be really important. And true confidence, and you'll notice this with yourself too, if you take some time to reflect, true confidence is rooted in competence. So being the expert in something, feeling like you have a really great understanding of something. So for example, I might have really great confidence in talking with students about social emotional concerns. If you asked me about rotorcraft engineering, which is what my dad does, I couldn't help you, right? Because I don't have competence in that, so I wouldn't be confident talking about it. So the same thing comes with our students and being able to share their own stories and their own experiences. So if we allow our students to be the expert in their own life and their own story, and to explain their experiences to us, then they become the expert in that, and they're going to build their confidence. And one of the things that students really need in order to build confidence, and this is where we come in as their grownups, at the school and at home, is that they just need to know that they are safe and protected. to gain that confidence to try new things and to trust their abilities. And so that's going to be something that will be something that we can really help with. Connection, creating meaningful connections can lead to those future successes. And that can be people at school, peers, family members, people in the community. In middle school, like we talked about, that peer connection is going to be really, really important for them. But it's also important that us as adults help our students understand that it's important to find a safe grown-up at school. So whether that be a school counselor or an administrator or a teacher or a yard aide or the crossing guard in the morning, whoever that might be, having a safe adult at school is going to be really important, especially if they might struggle or they need somebody to talk to during the school day. Here we go. And then the next one that we are going to talk about is, whoops, went too fast. I got too excited. Character. Your middle schoolers are going to start having some of those big questions, whether they say them out loud or just to themselves. Who am I? Where do I belong? Developing that sense of right and wrong and making good choices. We've talked a lot here at school about their brains and how they're guard dogs and they're elephants. So their amygdala, their hippocampus, their memories and emotions can impact their ability to make good choices. So their owl brains. So that's something that your students have all learned about. So really making sure that we're supporting them through that and allowing them the opportunities to make those mistakes. And then looking at, okay, well, how might you handle that differently next time? Where do you feel like you might have struggled there that you might be able to do something different? And opening that line of communication with them. Coping skills. We've talked a lot about coping skills here at Bay Laurel this year, a bunch of different ways that students can take care of themselves and calm their bodies down, especially if they're having really heightened emotions. And this is something that you guys can talk about at home, but ultimately when they get to that point where they are able to cope, that's really that resilience that they're showing, that they're able to bounce back and face something that's challenging and calm themselves down from that. So now what, right? What can we do? What can we actually do about this to support our kids? So what is my responsibility as my fifth grader, almost middle schoolers grown up, is to let my student define their experience, what that means to them. What does it mean to be a middle schooler? How is their day going? What do they need? Right? Letting them make mistakes. This is so key. And this is something I've talked to the middle school counselors about a lot, is not starting to solve every problem for them as they're grown-ups, right? We need to let them work through those challenges. We need to let them make mistakes and let them know that mistakes are okay. And that's how they're going to learn. We don't want to plow everything out of the way, every single potential roadblock or challenge for them, because we want to make sure that they can learn those self-advocacy skills. We want to make sure that they can see something that's challenging and not completely break down because they're not used to taking care of something or not used to working through something that's difficult. We want to model behavior for them. That's something that is really great that we can do as they're grown-ups. We can model behavior for them. We can show them like, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed today, so I'm going to go for a walk. Do you want to come with me? Or sharing our feelings with them, because that lets them know that it's safe for them to share their feelings with you. Saying, hey, I'm feeling really sad today. You know, I'm really missing my mom. You know, I am feeling, really overwhelmed today because there's a lot on my plate. What's something that we might be able to do together to make sure that we can like calm ourselves down, right? So there's a lot of different opportunities here for that. Always also asking for help, showing them that it's okay to ask for help. That's really, really great. Praising the right way using growth mindset. We talked a little bit about that already, some ways, some things that we can say, and really listening, because our students just really want somebody who's going to listen, and asking some of those open-ended questions to them at the end of the day, and letting them know that what they share with us is safe and it's okay. Really, our kids, they just need a grown-up that's going to care. And you're going to have a student that's going through puberty, that is experiencing a brand new space, that's experiencing, a brand new type of schedule, and it's going to be a lot. So just knowing that you're somebody who cares for them is something that's going to be really great for them. Some signs of stress that you can potentially look for in your student. Those are going to be like physical symptoms. Your students have learned this year, that sometimes feelings show up in our bodies before we're actually able to put words to them. So stomach aches, headaches, tiredness, those are things, if you're seeing that change in them, to bring that up with them and ask them about it, because maybe it's an underlying feeling and not necessarily something that is an actual physical illness. Impact on sleep. Your students know this also, but they needed 9 to 11 hours of sleep every single night for their brains to reset and function as a teenager and as an adolescent. So making sure that they're set up for that sleep time. They won't tell you this, but they also learned that they need at least 30 minutes to an hour of screen-free time before bed. That's their phone, their computer, their TV, and that's to allow them their brains to have deeper sleep when they actually go to sleep. So that's something that we can also have support with. Other signs to look for: an impact on their academic performance that seems different. It is going to be a big change. They're going to be learning a brand new type of school when they get to middle school. But if you're noticing that something seems really different than what you're used to in your student, talk to them, talk to the school counselor, bring that up with their teacher. That's going to be something that you can kind of open that door with them. A change in friendship groups. They are going to be making a bunch of new friends, but if you notice once they kind of get settled, if there's a big change, talk to them about that. At-risk behavior can sometimes come up starting in middle school and high school. So things like drugs or alcohol, fighting, self-harm, promiscuous behavior, those are all signs that your student really needs some additional support. And as we get towards the end, there are little ways that we can prepare our students so that they can have that decreased sense of stress as they're getting ready for middle school. Some of those biggest concerns are the things that are really small when you think about it, that they might be really stressed out about. So asking your student where they might feel the most concern as they're getting ready for middle school, and you can help prepare them with that. So things like making sure that you go to that orientation or registration day so that they can walk around campus and really see what the campus looks like, where classes might be, where they're going to eat lunch, where the bathrooms are, looking at the campus map together, that can be helpful. Practicing using a combination lock. This is something that a lot of kids don't realize is going to cause them a lot of stress and anxiety. And so when they get their PE locker, for example, it's going to have a combination lock. So being able to practice ahead of time how to do a combination lock is something that can be really helpful and decrease stress as students get started with middle school. Practice how to ask for directions and how to ask for help. So something like in that first week of school, they're learning everything. They're learning where everything is. So being able to stop and look an adult in the eye and say, hey, I'm still figuring this out. Can you tell me where I need to go? Being able to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. When is a good time for me to come get help? That's going to be something that'll be really, really powerful. And I'm also actually going to be doing a lesson at the very end of the month with your fifth graders on how to send an email asking for help, because really your student should be the one advocating for the support and help that they might need. And so I'm going to teach them the ways that they can do that with their teachers in middle school, and how to CC you as the parent on those emails so that you're still in the loop, but that those questions about their academics are really coming from them when it's just a specific day-to-day type of question, not a large overarching concern. Encourage them to get to know their teachers and go meet their counselors. Their counselors at middle school are there to support them academically, socially, and emotionally as well. Encourage them to join a new club, meet some new people. There's clubs for pretty much every single possible interests when they get to middle school. And so that can be something that can be really, really helpful. And then I think one of the biggest things as we close out today is talking to them about what is in their control and what's not in their control. They can't control what their schedule looks like in terms of what order their classes are in. They can't control which friends are in each of their classes or what their teachers are, who their teachers are. They can't control what homework is assigned each day or who they sit by in class most of the time. But they can control how they prepare. They can control how they ask for help and how they ask questions, how they seek support. They can control that conversation with you, that open dialogue with you about their schedule and that balance that they need. That there's so much that's within their control that will really allow them, like we were talking about earlier, to build that resilience, to really be able to feel best prepared and feel like they're set up for success. Because that's really our goal as their grown-ups, right? Is to make sure that our students are set up for success. And the last thing is, this is one of my most favorite quotes, especially as I'm getting ready to transition our kids off to middle school, is just the reminder that failure is a bruise. It's not a tattoo. So those mistakes, those are not things that are permanent for our students. They're not something that's going to define them for the rest of their experience. It really is something that they can learn from, and really encouraging that with them is going to be really, really powerful. I am going to be sharing this information. I am going to be posting this video on my counseling website and making sure that it gets sent out to you. And then I have a couple handouts that I'll also be posting and sharing out as well. And so I want to say thank you all so much for joining me today.